is the KRON-TV Morning News.
The pride of American whiskey and the pride of Scottish whiskey, ladies and gentlemen. We have them both here. So what's the difference between the two? Do they really taste different? And we're going to spend extensive time trying to find out the differences. They're made differently, they taste differently. We'll tell you why coming up on KRON-TV News Weekend. What a privilege, ladies and gentlemen. Two of the stars of Whiskey Fest 2010, which took place in San Francisco yesterday. Jeff Arnett is the master distiller for Jack Daniel's, yes, America's Pride. And Richard Patterson is the master blender for Dalmore, single malt Scotch. And they are joining us today because we want to talk a little about the differences between, this is sour mash whiskey, yep, and this is Scotch whiskey. Come on, join us over here. So just for starters, Jeff. Okay. What's the difference between a sour mash and a regular whiskey?
Well, a sour mash whiskey will use a setback in the fermentation process. So when we distill...
Well, I've had some setbacks in my fermentation, but what does that mean?
Well, what it means is that when we distill one fermenter, we will recycle a portion of it back into a new fermenter so that it kind of keeps everything related. It lowers the pH, so it's called a sour mashing process.
So it's almost a little like a soup stock where you just keep running.
It is. It's kind of like back setting, yeah, from a starter for sourdough.
Okay, so then you put in good water, corn, barley, rye.
Yep. We have a cave spring that flows on our property that's iron-free but very mineral-rich because it flows through limestone. Because we're an American whiskey, we have a high corn content, so that's the biggest portion of our grains. Mm-hmm. We use malted barley and rye, and the mix of those grains is unique to us, and it provides a unique flavor for Jack Daniel's. At that point in our process, a lot of people are confused about a bourbon versus a Tennessee whiskey. Through that
I know
portion,
it's constantly a source of confusion to me.
We have to correct people because we get called a bourbon a lot. But
okay,
actually, at that part of our process, Jack Daniel's is a bourbon.
But you put it through charcoal.
We do. We go through 10 feet of hard sugar maple charcoal, and that makes it become a Tennessee whiskey. And you can tell in the glasses there how distinctly different they are. There's a definite grain identity.
By looking at them or by tasting?
Just by smelling or tasting. Smelling, smelling will tell you a lot. You can definitely smell the corn, and then you can.
Oh yeah, that is highly here. they call Richard the nose, by the way.
The people who've studied charcoal mellowing say that eventually the removal of that grainy edge happens in the barrel, but it takes about 2 years to happen, and we do it in days.
Now, here's what's interesting. Then it goes into barrels that are charred.
Yep. And this is one of the unique distinction of American whiskeys and bourbons versus Scotch is that by class and type, we have to use a brand new barrel. So it'll have to be a new charred oak barrel. We can use it one time, and then of course we pass it on to our friends in Scotland to use it.
So that's
however they see
that's very interesting. So
it's a very synergistic relationship.
So after you're finished with the barrel, it goes to Richard's folks. Yep. And Richard, what's the process for you?
Well, this is Dalmore from a single distillery. That's one distillery only. Like in Tennessee, there are now 3 distilleries, but in Scotland we have 106 distilleries, and all the whiskey for a single malt has to come exactly from that distillery. We take that lovely wood that Jeff's talking about, American white oak. We take 2 barrels per tree. We obviously mature our whiskey.
Now, I'm really shocked, though, at the tiny, tiny portions that you distill. Is that the largest barrel that you guys can come up with?
That's a prop. The barrel is about 200 liters or 53 gallons.
We actually, for Dalmore, we actually use not only 50% American white oak, but we have sherry barrels, and they're 600 liters, and they give us that lovely rich color.
So that's different scotches have used different types of barrels?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And this is really highlighted in this particular spirit here, because this is actually very highly complex. This is 18 years old. Remember, we're using 100% barley, and of course we're using natural water. The distillery goes back to 1839. But what is so important is actually getting into the whiskey. This is what we call a capita nosing glass, and I always say if I ever see you holding a glass like this or nosing like this, I'll kill you. So what you need to do is swirl it around. You must get into the whiskey. You put it on the carpet, and then we get into it. But remember, keep it down there. Bring it up and say hello. Like a woman's perfume, it'll have at least 26 different nuances coming in there. Because we mature this in American white oak, port, Madeira, Masala, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Methuselah sherry. This Methuselah sherry is 30 years old. So as soon as you see it, bring it up, say hello, how are you, get into it, and then it starts opening up.
Okay, now we have, I believe, 30 seconds for me to just do a taste of 2 different.
Okay.
20 seconds, the producer says. She's already giving me a hard time.
So okay, just take a little water.
Do you add water to your...
typically, no.
Okay.
Don't need to do that. Try our single barrel versus his.
Single barrel?
You should notice the vanilla and caramel notes that come from Jack Daniel's. It'll have a nice complexity to it.
They are tremendously different.
Yes. With Jack Daniel's, you should notice a nice vanilla caramel start, a creamy center. Will always exit clean.
What you got to do is keep the top of the mouth underneath the mouth. Keep it there. Keep it in the mouth for at least 20 seconds.
Okay, so listen, the producer says we have to go, so I cannot finish this tasting while we're on the air, okay? We're going to take a break. We've got the gardening segment coming up. In the meantime, I'm going to be at work here, ladies and gentlemen, detecting the differences between great American whiskey and great Scotch whiskey. We'll report the results, I don't know, someday. Coming up on KRON-TV this weekend. Thanks.